Today we're talking about plain text email marketing. So after making our clients over $10 million while maintaining a 91.2% retention rate, I discovered that the highest performing emails are not the fancy, overly designed ones, but they're the plain text emails that look like they came from a coworker, for example. And so in today's video, I'm going to reveal when to use plain text emails, how often to send them, and a 6-point checklist that we use internally to turn simple copy and text into serious, consistent, predictable revenue from these basic types of emails. So before I get into the details here, I want to sell you a little bit on why you should even use these types of emails. So the first point is that you can avoid spam filters a lot more easily with plain text content. So just to give you a little bit of game on how, like Gmail, Yahoo, Outlook, how these spam filters work, they're essentially vetting out the email when you send to people, looking for how promotional it is. There's something called promotional percentage, meaning if your email is all text, that looks like a very real email that someone would be receiving compared to when you send an email to someone that's all images. It's like, obviously, even when we send image-filled emails, we still do it in a way where it's optimized and we can still land in the primary tab a high percentage of the time, but you're never gonna be able to compete with a plain text email that's literally all text. So long story short, when you have a text only email, it looks way better to these spam filters on Gmail, Yahoo, Outlook, etc. And you have a much higher percentage of deliveries in the primary inbox of your email subscribers. Second point is that plain text emails feel very personal and authentic. So kind of like I said at the intro here, they kind of resemble the same type of email that you would send to a coworker, for example. And obviously when your coworker emails you, assuming it's a coworker that you like and it's a project that you're engaging in, you're gonna respond. And it also creates a deep sense of like authenticity with the emails that you're sending out, whereas a designed email is like very brandy and it's not personal whatsoever. And the third and most important point is that they typically generate more revenue than design emails do. This is probably the most surprising thing for most people. And of course, it's fully dependent on what your business is and what products or services you sell. But for any product or service that requires good copy and good convincing in order to get someone to purchase, plain text emails usually outperform a designed email. So one really good thing to think about here is when you see an ad on YouTube, you skip it. Like, you're almost annoyed at some point that you even have to watch this ad before you watch your video. Like, people don't wanna watch ads, But when you're scrolling on Instagram and you see content that looks organic and it's something that catches your attention and it engages you, you engage with it. And it's kind of that same principle that translates over to email marketing, where if you open an email and it's super heavily designed, yeah, if it's engaging, you'll probably still engage with it and we still use it for that reason. But it looks much more like marketing and much more like an ad than it does if it's just like a personal plain text email. So that's like a nice way that anyone can kind of like conceptualize this and relate to it. And added benefit that I haven't even talked about yet is that you can create plain text emails way faster than you can create design emails. So if you're in a time crunch and you want to get something out quick, plain text crushes it. However, the one caveat to plain text emails is that you have to be able to write good copy. And that's a big caveat, because if your copy sucks, these will not do well at all, because there's zero design to lean on here. All right, so when should you use plain text emails and how often should you send them? So this is fully dependent on whether you sell a visual type of product or a problem-solving type of product. Let me explain what I mean. Visual products is things like t-shirts, watches, jewelry, stuff like this. These types of products are sold by visual. It's not sold with great copy. Like, for example, if people buy your t-shirts or your clothing or your jewelry, whatever it is, by looking at it and just the way it looks, no amount of great copy is gonna sell that. But problem-solving products need great copy in order to be sold. And that's where the majority of products fall in. And that's the bucket that the majority of products fall into. So if you do sell a visual type of product or a visual line of products, you'll probably want to use plain text emails more sparingly, but there are still a lot of great occasions when you can use it. One good example is like if you're running a sale and it's kind of like getting to the end of the sale, sending like a from the founder email, plain text style, where you're talking about, the sale is ending soon, can be extremely effective. On the other hand, if you sell a product or a service that solves a specific problem, which once again is the majority of products that are being sold and services, you could literally make plain text your go-to type of content. For example, we have a client right now that's in the health niche. They sell supplements. And it's very rare for us to send out design content for them. I would say probably 90% of the emails that we send out for them to their list are completely plain text with zero visual aspect whatsoever other than just a logo at the top and a footer. And that's because they're an extremely copy-driven line of products. Like they're solving health product problems. People don't buy their products because of the way the supplement bottles look. People buy their products because they are convinced that the products will help them. So the real key here to wrap this up is to match your email strategy to how your customers make the buying decision. And now just to give you 3 quick scenarios where plain text will do really well for you. So like I said, sale announcements or last chance. Sending a really personal plain text email here can create a lot of urgency and drive very quick, immediate action, both at the beginning of a sale, in the middle of the sale, at the end of the sale, whatever it is. I've even seen one brand run a campaign, which we might even test this very soon, where they made it look like it was an email from one coworker at the brand to another coworker at the brand, almost accidentally leaking the sale code. Like the copy in the email literally said, hey, we're running this sale next week. The code is live now, here's the code. Make sure this doesn't get out to anyone until Tuesday next week. It was something along those lines, and I heard that campaign absolutely killed it for them. Another general scenario, and this is like a very broad bucket, but direct response campaigns. So this is where you're gonna use it a lot more commonly, where you're just trying to sell a specific product or like a specific collection, and you're using plain text to promote it. And keep in mind, a big aspect of plain text emails might be using it as curiosity to just sell that click over to the page that does the selling. If you want more context on the actual pages that you're creating to sell people further, I just dropped a video called pre-sell pages, or a video about pre-sell pages on this channel. You can probably click in this top corner here if you want to see that video. But once again, direct response, super simple. Like this is where you're going to use the most plain text emails. It's just selling the product and like using good copy to actually sell it in an effective way. Another great opportunity to use plain text is in your automated email sequences or your flows. So like one great example of this is in the abandoned cart flow. Let's say they get to the end of that flow, or maybe even at the start of that flow, and they get a plain text email in there that's from the founder, and it's saying, hey, I saw you were checking out this product. One thing I hear all the time about that product is that X, Y, and Z. And it's just like the top 3 objections that your company gets about that product specifically. And then you literally in the copy, you just answer those top 3 objections. Maybe you add some visual elements in there as well. That is so much more likely to get engaged with than the very basic cart flows that pretty much every brand is running right now. So now I'm gonna get into the 6-point checklist for converting plain text emails. I'm gonna reveal these one at a time so that you don't read ahead before I actually talk about it. And by the way, before I get into these are genuinely all like very important. It's not just like a generic list. Like I think about these every day. So number 1 is just making the copy concise. Especially if you're an e-commerce brand selling D2C, it's very important that you don't let like random paragraphs or even random words fall into your copy. One really good resource for this is hemingwayapp.com. It can kind of grade your copy and tell you like how complex it is or like what grade reading level it's at. But the main thing to remember here is if you can say the same thing but shorter and like more condensed down, do that. Number 2 is making the copy crystal clear to understand. A really good like litmus test that I like to think about for this is if someone could wake up like being half asleep and still understand what the copy is saying, you're good. So it's like you'll read a lot of copy where you just don't fully understand like what they are saying. Like I'm not following. You never want that. Like what you're saying should be crystal clear. If you're writing something or AI generates you a piece of copy and it's just not completely clear like what's actually being said there or like what the argument is, it needs to be cleaned up because the confused mind never buys. Number 3, and this one's huge, is a strong logical sales argument. So literally all this means is what you're saying, like the entire big idea behind your campaign or your promotion needs to make logical, strong sense to the person. And again, these sound basic, but it's literally the core fundamentals for writing great copy. Like the line of reasoning that you go through in order to convince them to make this purchase should make complete sense to them. And if it does, it's likely gonna lead to them giving you money in exchange for the product or service. Number 4 is very simple. It's just don't be boring. I definitely fall into this all the time where I'll read through some copy that I wrote and realize that it just wasn't that engaging, especially nowadays where we have YouTube videos we can watch, we could scroll Instagram, we could scroll TikTok. Everyone's attention spans are very low. So that makes it even more important to keep the copy engaging and keep it interesting to the person based on who that ideal demographic is. So the crazy part about this checklist is that it used to only be these 4, and we just recently tacked on number 5 and 6. So number 5 kind of has 2 parts, and it's about speaking to the right emotions and then correctly communicating to each of those emotions. So before you write any of these plain text emails, you kind of want to consider what are the core emotions that we need to drive here. For example, if it's the last chance of a sale, for example, you might need to drive, the emotion of not wanting to miss out. And then the second part of this is speaking to those emotions that you selected the correct way. Another example is like a weight loss promo that we were recently doing for one of these other clients. With that specific demographic, the emotion we had to speak to there was the frustration of trying all these different things and not seeing success with it. And I'll be real, this is something that I'm trying to improve a lot with myself, is being able to speak to those emotions the correct way. So for that weight loss promo, we had to go really deep on speaking to that emotion of frustration the proper way so that it actually resonated with the reader. All right, and finally, number 6 is use that market's language or speak their language. The best way to think about this is that 40-year-old women think and experience like reading a lot differently than a 16-year-old man. So the core lesson here is just to know your demographic, like know who you're speaking to and be very exact about that. And then use their type of wording, use their phrasing, speak how they speak. And also, this is something that I have to constantly remind myself of, but you want to write how your demographic speaks. So the way they would talk to each other in conversation, your copy should fit right into that conversation in a very natural way. I constantly catch things in my copy where it just doesn't really sound like how people talk. And you want to completely erase that as much as you can. All right, so to summarize this, I just told you why you should be using plain text emails, when and how often to use plain text emails, 3 key scenarios where plain text emails will print money for you, and even this 6-point checklist on how to make sure that the copy in your plain text emails is actually going to convert. Now, if you want to use AI to make these emails even better, in the top link in the description, I'm going to drop our full step-by-step plug and play AI prompting guide. That guide literally gives you exact prompts and processes to go through to generate email angles, write the email copy, and even generate design assets for those emails. So that'll be top link in the description. And then if you want my full course on email and SMS marketing top to bottom, that's going to be on this video right here on the screen. If you got any questions on this, drop them in the comments, and I'll see you in the next one.